Welcome back to Vandy Football Insider. I'm Dave Ammenheuser, the sports editor of the Tennessean. With me today is Jeff Lockridge, our beat writer here at the Tennessean, and Barton Simmons, joining us today from 247sports.com. He's a recruiting expert, and he's giving us his input on Vanderbilt's recruiting this season. Guys, let's talk a little bit about last year's recruiting class, back to 2013. I know James Franklin redshirted a lot of guys.
Right.
Now, one thing I haven't seen written anywhere or out in the media too much is a lot's been written. Let me back up. A lot's been written about the guys who were going to leave that were committed this year
Sure.
and left. But what about those guys who still haven't even played it down at Vanderbilt? Is there any chance those redshirt freshmen last year could jump ship?
Well, I think there's always that possibility, but I think the reason you haven't seen much written, and maybe you're hinting at me to get another story out, I don't know. But maybe the reason we haven't heard that much is because I think most of these guys are on board and still happy with the first year that they had at Vanderbilt and the opportunity to stay and get some playing time in the near future. It's a pretty good bunch. Like Dave said, the vast majority redshirted. You had a few get on the field, Darius Sims and Jordan Cunningham by necessity at certain positions. But I haven't heard many rumblings, Barton, about kids that are wanting out. I think most of these kids, once they've met Mason and had their nerves settled a little bit, are more than willing to stay.
No, I haven't either. I haven't heard those rumblings. Derek Mason's got a great track record, and I think still, in-house, they're still sort of getting comfortable with the coaching staff and meeting the coaching staff and learning about what's to come. And right now, I think Vanderbilt got their guy that they wanted. And, there's no reason to think there's not some confidence within the team. In fact, there's been a lot of positive social media and tweets of that regard from players that seem pretty optimistic about what's to come.
The one guy in that group, Dave, that they could ill afford, especially at this point in their commitment class, to lose would be Johnny McCrary. They're already thin at quarterback. They've got Patton Robinette. Josh Grady's coming off a knee injury. Johnny's the other kid and a dual threat guy who had a big high school career down in Georgia, and a lot of people see him as sort of the future at that position. You occasionally see a message board post, oh, is Johnny happy? Is he thinking about leaving? But based on the way that Derek talked in his introductory press conference, I think he's got plans for McCrary down the road too. And I think as long as they keep him happy and have a plan for him, then they're in decent shape there.
Okay. Barton, talk a little bit about Derek Mason's job as far as recruiter. How does that stack up recruiting here now in the SEC when he had been out in the Pac-12? I mean, what differences do you think you'll see, or is it more challenging in this market, or are you just selling the institution like he was at Stanford?
I do think it's a significantly bigger challenge for him than what he had at Stanford, because at Stanford you really are kind of the Ivy League of college football, and you can just throw that S up there, and any kid that's a high academic kid is going to respond to that. And particularly on the West Coast, where kids, that draw to a certain program isn't quite as strong as maybe SEC country. A high academic kid that was raised an Auburn fan is still going to want to go to Auburn, and that's nothing against Auburn's academics, but that's just the way Southeastern kids were raised. They're not going to be looking for a Vanderbilt or a Stanford necessarily. So I think that's a challenge. That's a new challenge. And I think, frankly, on the West Coast, recruiting, the pace is a little bit slower as far as when those offers go out, when those commitments start happening. In the Southeast and SEC, it's a very different environment with regard to just, when those offers go out, the competitive nature of the recruiting trail. And I think he's prepared for that. He's recruiting the Southeast. They've won some big battles at Stanford to land some elite prospects. There's no doubt about that. But again, I just think that there's going to be he's going to have to sort of prove himself that he's up for this SEC task here. I do think you're going to see a very different approach than James Franklin, who was anxious to get the highly rated classes, get the kids with a lot of major offers, get kids with stars next to their name. I don't think Derek Mason cares about that. I think that he is very content trusting his evaluation, whether the kid's got a 2-star next to his name and no offers. or whether he's a 5-star kid. And that's just a different approach to the staff. And, it may not make some of my readers happy at 24/7 Sports, but I think it's a process that's really had a lot of success at Stanford.
Well, another guy that didn't really care about that was Bobby Johnson at Vanderbilt, and while his overall record doesn't speak to the record Derek Mason would like to have at Vanderbilt, he didn't leave the cupboard bare.
Yeah.
He had some good 2- and 3-star kids, Jordan Matthews, Zach Stacy, Wesley Johnson, Casey Hayward, plenty of guys that kind of flew under the radar in the recruiting process that he brought in and helped James Franklin win a lot of ball games.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, thank you. Actually, I have one last question for Barton. I'm going to show you a photo, Barton. Can you tell me if this college football player would have ever been recruited by Vanderbilt? Number 3 there, guys. That's Barton in, about 2002?
Yeah, that's right. That's interesting story here. I actually turned down a scholarship offer from Vanderbilt. Had a gray shirt offer under Woody Woodenhofer. Dennis Harrison was my recruiter, but I chose the Ivy League. If Derek Mason or James Franklin were in my living room, that would have been tougher to turn down.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it very much. And maybe we get back together and talk about this stuff again, maybe right before the spring game. That would be great.
Be awesome.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks a lot. It's Dave Ammenheuser, the sports editor of the Tennessean, joined by Jeff Lockridge, our beat writer here at the Tennessean, and a special thank you to Barton Simmons from 247sports.com joining us today. Thanks a bunch, guys.
Thanks.